Good evening, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. Right in the middle of the work week here, kind of winding her down tomorrow, and then into the weekend. Everyone got Christmas shopping, Christmas parties planned. Well, I hope so, and I hope that you're enjoying some time with your family and getting some good work done in the office. The thing I wanted to talk about today is the concept of no worship without sacrifice. So, this title sort of comes from Nassim Nicholas Taleb article that I was reading and thinking on today. And in the article, which you should read, you can find it on my Twitter or just by Googling, which is the way things are done these days, right? Taleb talks about the concept of worship and sort of the more ancient concept of sacrifice, particular burnt offerings of animals, which, I think we broadly in our society tend to consider primitive at this day and age. I don't want to be too rude to anybody, but you don't see that happen so often, whereas once upon a time in Jerusalem and all these other cities, it happened a lot. It was a huge thing. And at certain times, you would go into the town, buy your animal, have it slaughtered and burnt. And depending on how wealthy you were, that sort of regulated the size and expense of the animal. So really wealthy people might slaughter a fatted calf or a bull. Less wealthy, maybe a sheep, and very poor would slaughter birds like doves. That's what I believe Jesus' family slaughtered. If I remember from the second last time I went to church 2 years ago. Anyways, so what's the point? Why does that matter? So in the old days, think about life in any of these places, whether it's maybe by Mecca or in China. China, they still do this, right? At a lot of Chinese, Vietnamese restaurants, you'll see an altar to God. I think it's usually pretty close to the entrance, um, sort of a house god. I talked once with a lady who I knew who ran Bubble Mania up on 16th Avenue about that. And she said that the house god is the idol essentially protects the restaurant. So you keep it happy by offering it fruit and burning a little incense, I believe. And she said that once she went into the restaurant and saw that the idol was smashed. So she was very worried and she called essentially a feng shui expert from Vancouver. This guy flew in from Vancouver and he went and took a look at everything, took a look at the restaurant, took a look at the idol where it was, and rendered his verdict. And what he said was that the house god, instead of this being a bad omen, this was actually a good omen because the house god had protected the restaurant from some calamity. So instead of the restaurant being hurt, the house god was hurt. And there's sort of two prices that you pay in this regard when we think of this idea of worship. So they worship the house god probably by a certain amount of thinking and prayer, but also by the offerings they give, which is sort of a form of skin in the game because it does cost money for incense and oranges and these sorts of things. It might not be a lot of money, but some. And that is a sacrifice. It's not a huge sacrifice in terms of a dollar amount, but it is a sacrifice. Because you could eat that orange, but no, you're going to give it to your God. And that was common throughout the world, I imagine. Certainly in the in the true pre-Christian era in say what's now Israel, where, as I mentioned, they slaughtered birds and calves and all that stuff as a sacrifice. So think back to that era, though. Think back to that time. There wasn't supermarkets. There wasn't, huge combines with fertilizer and all these things so that you had huge yielding crops, and food was aplenty. It wasn't uncommon for these people to see famine. Food was relatively expensive and took a lot of work to make. So by taking that food and not eating it, but instead giving it to your God, that's a gesture of tremendous importance, because you that food might be the difference between your life and death, in a bad year. And you're willing to say, "Hey, I'm gonna risk it, and I'm gonna place my faith, my trust in this God to whom I'm sacrificing whatever it is you're sacrificing." And so that gives you skin in the game when you're saying your prayers, because you're saying, "Listen, I gave you that calf. Please, I need your help now. Please come through for me." Whatever the thought process is. Um, and so it's something that I think is so often lost in our own life when I mean, obviously, I don't think a whole lot of us have been to actual animal sacrifices where animals were sacrificed and burnt to a god. But let's just use that as a sort of a simple sort of filter for looking at other areas of our lives. So, areas that we worship without sacrifice, what could those be? Maybe it's something like our football stars or NHL stars. Um, it's an empty form of worship, isn't it? Um, what about a form of worship with sacrifice? How about if you worship your own body, your health? In order to make that a reality, what do you have to do? You can't just sit there and say, "I really want to be healthy. I really want to be healthy." Although visualization and having a positive mindset is important, that's not gonna produce results if you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to get strong, if you're trying to learn how to box. You gotta sacrifice. You gotta go into the gym. You gotta sweat. You gotta work hard. You gotta take the time. You gotta be sore. You gotta get the Epsom salt going. You gotta get the cold showers going. And so, in order to truly worship, to worship yourself, to worship your body, you need to sacrifice. Okay? Sacrifice is going to be not a bird in this case, but it's going to be your sweat. It's going to be your time that you could be sitting watching someone else on TV or hanging out with your buddies eating wings. That time is sacrificed to your worship of your physical health. Anyways, that's sort of a funny way I've been thinking of things. And another sort of example is, think of your profession. I mean, when I look back, I started law school 11 years ago, and in a certain light, I gave up my youth to become a lawyer. I could have gone traveling, and I could have been a tree planter, and lived the life of Riley and got drunk lots and smoked weed lots or whatever else young people sort of do when they're dissipating. Instead, I just basically rutted a track back and forth to the university, was in class a lot. Yes, I did party a decent amount my first year and a half, which is part of the process. I also read a huge amount, went to court a lot, thought about ideas a whole lot, put in a lot of hard work, and at the end of the day, you become a lawyer. The hard work just continues. You got to keep sacrificing on that altar. Got to keep sacrificing for that which you worship, which is, in this case, the law is an object of worship. Anyway, so I've been thinking about that a lot, but let me know your thoughts, what you think about that. And so I guess there's two things that we should think about. One is that we're sacrificing for worthy objects of worship. So, I don't, if you sell your house and give the money to Pamela Anderson as some sort of sacrifice, I don't know if that's, she's really going to like that and that's going to make it a worthy object of your worship. Or let's also think of our sacrifice. Is our sacrifice too big or too little? Once we have found a perfect object of worship or fitting object of worship. Food for thought, my friends. Anyways, I hope you're having a good night. I was going to think about getting political there for a second, but I stopped myself. I'm sort of backing away from Twitter a bit. I find that it was probably an unworthy object of my worship, and I was sacrificing too much headspace, too much mental real estate to it. So I'll be on there a bit, but not as much as I have been. Um, and yeah, I hope things are going good in your life. Merry Christmas if we don't talk soon, and have a nice evening. Thank you.